Hey guys. Hey
Hey,
buddy.
hey,
Hey buddy, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Just got back from doing a walk around the beach up in Carmel.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day out.
Yeah, same here in Chattanooga. Just got out on my back patio and cracked open a couple bottles of Arcadian, and yeah, not a,
About to do the same.
not a bad day. Oh, awesome. What hat you have on there? Is that
Uh, Rose Bowl,
ah,
University, Washington, alma mater.
nice. That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. I always forget that. Yeah. Now is
die
your
hard.
is Max going to be going there?
We looked at the school and he likes it. He's kind of debating between Stanford, Oregon, and University of Washington.
Well,
He wants to.
that's some tough
He wants
choices.
to. Wants to major in sports business.
Oh, cool.
Uh, with
Yeah.
a minor in sports literature, or writing,
Awesome.
sports journalism. So, um, uh, University of Oregon or, has a major in sports business through their business department, and it's affiliated with Nike. So it's very
Yeah.
encouraging in that respect because Nike's connected with every major
Oh yeah, it's huge.
sport,
That's huge.
baseball, football,
Yeah,
basketball.
yeah.
So he thinks if he spends the next 4 years of undergrad, you know, doing work with Nike, that he'll have a shot to go pretty much anywhere. UW offers a similar degree, and Stanford does as well, but neither UW or Stanford have an affiliation with any professional sports company.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah, true. Yeah, yeah. Let's yeah,
So,
sounds like that'd be a good spot for him to start if he wants to get into that, for sure.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Cool. Well, all
hey,
right. Well, we
you
got
like,
we got people slowly joining on here. So usually kind of how we start
cool.
is just we're gonna taste and talk about two wines tonight. But usually kind of let the winemaker, and tonight Joe Davis of Arcadian, just kind of talk through just a brief little rundown about Arcadian, kind of what you do, your focus,
Yeah.
that kind of thing, and yeah, we'll start there.
Sure. Well, I've been making wine for a long time, 35 years now. So I guess I'm one of the old timers. Uh, there's such a modern group of young winemakers come out the scene almost every year. Um, there's a good chance that, many of the companies that you represent, probably haven't been around for 10 years or
Right?
less,
No,
maybe.
absolutely.
No. So, and it seems like every year there's, a new group of young guns who come on, and which is great, I think, for the wine industry because we've seen it evolve with so many varietals. Who would have thought that a winery would be focusing on Chenin Blanc or Carignan? I mean, they were ripping those vines out in the 70s and 80s
Right.
because they couldn't give those grapes away. And those old vineyards that are still around are still relatively inexpensive. But I think that, with the increasing group of young individuals who are discovering wine, they have no biases. So, they're not so focused on Cabernet, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Sauvignon Blanc, which for so many years kind of led the pack. Now they're like, well, what's wrong with, Mongoose or Chenin or, Carignan?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
and so there's a lot more choices, a lot more people. But you know, I went to school in the early '80s and discovered Pinot Noir um, through Burgundy, and have been chasing that elusive chalice all of my career. Starting at Morgan Winery in the early '80s and working
Right.
there for 10 years, and then spending a couple years at Dujac, and then for the last 24 years at my own place. And yeah, that's kind of really the beginning for me, was having an opportunity to taste a world class Pinot Noir with no expectations and going, wow, this is really great. I want to do this. And then figuring out how to get there, and then still chasing that, that pinnacle, if you will.
Right. Right.
And, have all of my career focused on making Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, going back, even very early, the 1986, President Reagan gave my Chardonnay to Premier Gorbachev at the Moscow Summit meeting, and that put Morgan Winery on the map. I was 25 years old, just sort of starting out and not really knowing what I was doing, but having the experience of Davis in my back pocket,
Right.
and a whole lot of ideas helped sort of launch that. And then Pinot Noir back in the mid '80s wasn't very good. Most wineries were attacking it from the perspective of Cabernet, so they were making it like Cabernet, extending the macerations, brutally attacking it with punch downs, and the wines, would get very tannic and bitter, and
Right.
they were pretty poor examples of what Pinot Noir could be. And throughout the '80s, more guys were going off to visit or explore or study or learn in Burgundy, and bringing back those ideals. You know, some of the very early producers in Oregon, some of the very early producers in Carneros, and certainly, myself in the Santa Lucia Highlands. And, experimenting with whole cluster fermentations and traditional pigeage, where we tread the grapes by foot rather than punch them down with some pneumatic device, and whole cluster fermentations, and just things like that were so radical in the late '80s that almost nobody was doing them.
Right.
And now it's everybody does it that way.
Right. Right.
I can remember this was probably very early on, probably 1997. Working with small fermenters that you couldn't control the temperature, small open tops. We needed to figure out a way to be able to do that, so that we didn't, Pinot Noir is a fast fermenter, tends to, take off quickly and reach really high temperatures in the fermentation, well into the mid 90s, which helps to set colors, but also burns off a lot of the fruit flavors. A lot of the esters volatilize and go into the air. And so then you have a more sort of savory style of Pinot Noir rather than any sort of fruit component to it. And so we had to figure out how to do that. I had started implementing dry ice in the mid 80s. And in fact, probably one of the first guys. I don't know if anybody else would employ dry ice. And we happened to be, I was working at Morgan, and right in the heart of Salinas, there was a vegetable plant that was producing dry ice to keep vegetables cold for shipping and packing.
Right.
To grocery stores around the country. So we went to them and said, can you make us some dry ice? And they said they'd do it. And they were making it in about the shape of a pancake. And if you remember, frozen vegetables had like a thick, waxy box. Like if you bought green beans in the frozen section, they came in a thick, sort of waxy box.
Yeah, you just rip it open.
Yeah, they would take the sides of the box and put those in between the slabs of ice
Right.
so that it wasn't sticking together, wasn't one big giant block. And, we'd go over there daily and buy, a couple of thousand slabs of pancakes and throw those in the open top fermenters so that we could keep, have a cool fermentation to try to preserve the fruit. And this was especially important later on when alcohol started to rise. So back in the 80s when I started making Pinot Noir, the conversion factor was about 0.51. So if you picked, grapes at 23 bricks, you could multiply that by 0.51 and get your potential alcohol. But as yeast began to tolerate higher levels of ethanol in the fermentation, they were able to metabolize greater amounts of sugar. And so, a bottle of Chardonnay or Bar in the mid 80s would be, half, just shy of a 0.5% of sugar and still be considered dry. Now, a Pinot Noir that's fermented to dryness is like 0.001. So we see those alcohols elevate as a result of that. I mean, if you're picking at the same sugar levels, let's say 23 bricks, the conversion factor is now 0.61. It's not up a tenth of a point.
Yeah.
So multiply that same sugar by the new conversion factor, then you have a higher level of alcohol, even though you picked the same sugar level. So we began, picking earlier and earlier because we didn't want alcohol to be high. We were looking for moderate alcohols. And so, that meant that it was essential that we preserve all the fruit aromas. If we're picking at a potential of 12 to 13%, we needed to keep all the berry fruit that we could, and that meant that we couldn't ferment to a very high temperature. So we did keep it in the 80s.
Yeah.
So it became really critical that we have, a way to manage the fermentation temperatures on the caps and keep them in the mid 80s at the peak. So those were kinds of things that were cutting edge, new wave in the early 90s, late 80s. And then, I saw that in Burgundy. That was pretty common behavior. And I'd say by the turn of the century, by early 2000s, just about every winemaker was doing that. But in 97, when I brought in my first box of dry ice, the Central Coast Gases had figured out a way to make dry ice for me in these little, tablets, or, they're like popcorn type of thing. We could scoop them in directly rather than peel off the old wax boxes. And so I brought in the first box of ice, and I must have had 60 people around my fermenters trying to figure out what the heck I was doing.
Why is this guy throwing popcorn on his grapes?
Yeah, and
cold
and
popcorn.
You see all this smoke.
Yeah.
Out, looks like they're getting ready for Halloween.
Exactly.
And the following year, like 1998, I got a call from the general manager of Central Coast Gas. He says, "Hey, I just want to call and let you know all your dry ice is free this year." And I said, "Why?" And he says, "I've had over 200 orders for dry ice." He goes, "I don't think we can actually accommodate all these wineries that now are calling and asking for dry ice." I said, "Hey, I'm happy to have all the dry ice." It was a few $1,000s in dry ice.
That's great. And so the first vintages of Arcadian itself was what, 97, 98? Is that right?
96.
96.
Yeah, I leased 4 acres of Chardonnay at Biennacido and farmed that myself and produced just about 8 tons of grapes and made 6,000 bottles, 1,000 6-packs. And that met with a lot of success, and people were you know, have you had Arcadian? You know, there was a lot of discussion, and that was really helpful. And then in '97, we added Sleepy Hollow to the project, and then we brought in Pinot Noir from both Biennacido and Sleepy Hollow and Pizzoni, and then that just grew in '98, '99. We added Deerberg. 2001, we added Fiddlesticks and Gary's, and by 2002, we were making Gary's Syrah in '99, 2000, 2001.
That's right. Yeah.
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 And those wines,
You've worked a lot of really great vineyard sites in your area for sure.
Yeah, because I'd already spent 10 years there. I knew Santa Lucia Highlands better than most, and you know, probably a good chance that I'm probably the oldest living winemaker that's worked in Santa Lucia Highlands. It's still around.
That's awesome.
So,
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I want to say in 2008, I had been approached by some wine club members, and they said, you know, why don't you make some rosé? I mean, and I said, well, you know, that wouldn't be hard to do. You know, if an opportunity arises, I'll consider it. And I had some Pizzoni Pinot Noir that had been riper than I wanted it to be, and so I decided to bleed off some of the juice, displace it with some water to keep the alcohols, you know, under that 14% range, and so we made, you know, probably the only vineyard designated single vineyard Pizzoni rosé ever.
That's some fancy rosé right there.
It got gobbled up quickly.
I bet.
And then we followed it up with some Clos Pepe rosé in must have been 2014, I think, was the first vintage. So we didn't do rosé every year. It was just whenever you know, I had the idea or the time to do it, because it's got to be relatively early, and you never know, harvest can swamp you.
Yeah.
And it was mostly made for myself. I mean, I like drinking it and a few of the wine club members, but the wine's got good reviews, and then people started asking about it. And so then I decided that I would focus on, you know, a particular vineyard that was exclusive for rosé. And so we released the 2018 Theresa Noelle, which is hopefully in everybody's glass.
Yeah, so that's going to be the first wine we start off with here. So yeah, so tell us a little bit about that vineyard and just kind of the winemaking process on this wine in particular, Joe.
Pretty easily. So Theresa Noelle is in the sort of northwestern corner of the Santa Rita Hills. It's adjacent to Raj Par Evening sparkling wine. So we can you know, pick this pretty late, still have really low sugars, low alcohols, and really high acids. And I think rosé benefits from that. I mean, it has to have almost the kind of acidity that you get from, you know, Sauvignon Blanc, or Chenin Blanc, or anything that's kind of crispy finish to it, because most people are going to be drinking it outside on a nice day like this, where you and I are drinking it.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's a perfect wine for that occasion. You know, sun's going down. I mean, I'm literally about 10 miles from the ocean, and I'm looking, you know, west down from Carmel Valley into Carmel Beach. and watching the sunset, you know, and having a little cheese and drinking some rosé is a kind of a good way to start the evening, if you
That
will.
is. That's a perfect way to start an evening.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So,
so yeah,
so this was went right from being hand picked, hand sorted into the press. No crushing of the fruit at all. Um, we rotated the press, applied a little pressure, but we were basically pressing lightly, looking for the color. I wanted a not a dark red. I not wanted more of a salmon kind of color. Um, and it actually, we probably should have backed off on it a little bit earlier, because it did darken up in the barrel, and we didn't account for that. So, but that being said, I still like the wine. It's a pretty kind of salmon still. Uh, there's a hint of an orange tint to it a little bit,
yeah, for
but
sure.
it has, you know, and it went right into used barrels and was barrel aged in stainless, 50%, and then 50% really old barrels. And we bottled it in May. So this was bottled a year ago. But like all of my wines, they just get better with time. Uh, this was really lovely. It had kind of a fresh fruitiness to it. Now it's reached a point where it has much more complexing characters. I think it's a more substantial and interesting wine.
Yeah, it really is a really interesting rosé. It's quite enjoyable. It still has some things that you'd expect on a rosé, some really nice strawberry notes and things of that nature, and the acidity is amazing. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, this is really a great wine.
yeah. Just full of flavor. I mean, it's
Full, yeah.
just a lot of flavor. I mean, you roll that around in your mouth for a while, and
Hmm.
it's delicious. And last night we opened up a bottle of this, and we had it with some lox and
Oh, yeah.
uh, capers and lemon and dill.
Perfect.
Uh, you know, cold salmon and little pieces of salmon, and you know, sipping this wine and watching the sun go down.
Yep. Sounds awesome. Now, so this vineyard site, is this the only wine you've ever made from the Theresa Noelle vineyard?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. And you know, there's about 11 acres planted there. And as demand goes up for rosé, I mean, the rosé market has been, you know, flooded. We've seen over the last 2 or 3 years, everybody's making rosé
Right.
because there's such a demand for it. You know, so many people are drinking rosé. It used to be just a summertime thing. It's now become a year-round thing. Uh, People drink it in cold weather. They drink it in mild weather. They drink it in hot weather. And so I think you'll continue to see rosé grow. Um, and you know, it is price sensitive, so that's kind of a challenge. You have to have the right source, particularly Pinot Noir, because Pinot Noir is not an expensive grape. You're making rosé from Grenache or Syrah or Carignan.
Right.
Uh, those grapes can be cheaper, and so they can sell at a lower price point. And quality can be really super high, so it could be a really good price quality ratio. Um, this I think is worth every penny. It's just delivers on all cylinders. Can't
Yeah.
find a better
And
rosé, in my opinion.
I agree. It's at about a 26-ish dollar retail price point.
Right.
It's a single vineyard rosé. It drinks amazing, and it's rosé a Pinot Noir, and made by a great winemaker, and it's super enjoyable. Yeah, I think for there's a lot of really inexpensive French rosés that are just crushable.
Yeah.
I think at a 25-ish dollar price point, this is an amazing wine for being New World rosé, which the cost of the Pinot Noir
Yeah.
are not cheap.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so
And it stands up to substantial foods too. You know, you could drink this wine. There's enough flavor intensity to stand up to pork dishes and chicken dishes. It's not just, you know, cheese and cracker type of wine. I mean, you
right.
could actually serve this at a meal,
Yeah, for sure.
you know, and you know, roasted vegetables, which we've been doing quite a bit of asparagus and sweet onions and portobello mushrooms because the weather is so pleasant. You know, it's want to get outside and grill because your backyard is your only domain.
Yeah, no kidding, no kidding. Everybody's popping a lot of bottles in their backyard these days. So, of this rosé, the 2018, is this current, or is there another one, a 19?
This is current.
Okay.
We released it over the summer, but we have enough of it to get us through this summer. So
awesome. I know we have a few. We have about three-ish cases here in Chattanooga left, but I think this is a great wine for summer in Tennessee for sure.
Yeah, and we have more here in the winery.
Excellent. So good to know. Perfect.
I the tendency is to want to release wines earlier, particular rosé, because you can kind of get away with it.
Right.
I think most people who buy my red wines don't buy them with the intention of drinking them anytime soon. And I can tell from, the group of folks in Chattanooga who I've had the pleasure of meeting, are buying older Arcadians.
Absolutely.
Whether it's older Chardonnay, older Pinot Noir, older Syrah, because they've had enough experience with those wines to go, I'll buy the 2012 Clos Pepe Pinot Noir Pence Ranch or the 2008 Stolman Syrah, but I'm going to just put those away in the cellar and let them get some more age on them. I'd rather drink the 03s or 06s or 05s. And that's fine. It's, I think that's, for me, the pinnacle of what wine is. I mean, so many things happen over time to a wine that make it actually ultimately a more interesting wine.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I mean, if you ask people, including the people who are looking at this, to recall a wine that was really memorable or momentous to them, it's almost always an older wine.
Right.
You count on your hand, or the 3 or 4 occasions when you've had the opportunity to drink something with some age, whether it's an old Italian Barolo, an old Bordeaux, an old Burgundy, even an old Champagne.
Yep.
And you open this up and you just kind of nod your head. You just look around. Nobody has anything to say.
Yeah.
They're just like, wow, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
no, you're right. You catch a wine in the right spot, and it's magic. I know it's kind of a funny story. Leah and I, when we got married, were given a 95 Cristal, and I didn't know what the hell it even was. Honestly, we kept it. It was given to us in a brown paper bag, and we let it sit around, and it was not well taken care of, but somehow it survived. And when we opened it up with friends, it was like, holy shit. I didn't know champagne could even do that. It fortunately the wine lived, and it was in a pretty special place. But no, you're right. And honestly, the fun thing is with us working with you and here in Chattanooga, us and our customers and the wine shops here, we've all been fortunate to be able to open up a lot of great Arcadian because of some of the great library wines that we've had access to and things of that nature. So it has been fun to, we've had a lot of older Arcadians over the last couple of years for sure, which is great.
Yeah. I think I remember long before we actually, started working together, you and Leah were collecting Arcadian wines and having tastings with your friends. And I remember getting some photographs via text. I think there was a half bottle of 05 Sleepy Hollow Chardonnay that you guys were excited about and said, can we get any more of that? And I think an older Syrah.
Yeah.
And coming to Chattanooga to work directly with you last year, for the first time, and meeting some of those people, and now communicating via text with them. Some of them will open up bottles and send me a text and a picture of it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun because I think that's the best that wine has to offer. Is that conviviality, but also the connection. It
Absolutely.
really is conduit to communication. And there's no greater joy for a winemaker when they get to experience somebody taking pleasure in something that I've created. That's
Yeah, absolutely.
that's a
Well,
real.
yeah, we've had a lot of amazing bottles of your wine, but one of the benchmark wines for sure is that '05 Sleepy Hollow Chardonnay. That's something else.
I just recently did a sort of a deep cleaning in the cellar and came across about 4 bottles of that wine
Oh wow.
uh, in 750s, and probably 6 bottles of the '06.
Mm.
Uh, and I was like, wow, I know some people who would kill to get one of these
Yeah, there's
bottles.
probably some people.
Yeah, yeah.
All
So
right.
I squared them away.
Yeah, I bet. All right. Well, speaking of Chardonnay, let's move on to 2012 Clos Pepe
Yeah.
Vineyard Chardonnay.
Gotta finish my rosé.
Yeah, you don't want to mix those two together.
Uh,
That's the problem with doing a lot of talking is the drinking slows down.
yeah. It's early here.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure.
I love these wines. Um, the Chardonnay that I produce, whether it's from Sleepy Hollow or Biennacido or Clos Pepe or Sierra Madre, they all have sort of a unifying thread, which is they tend to be fairly savory. They're not very high in alcohol typically. They typically have higher acids, um, but they always have a little bit of that sort of earthy, barnyardy nose, whether it's straw or hay. Not funky,
Yeah.
but and as they get older, I mean, 2012 is quite young. Uh, it's 8 years old. For me, it's a little bit early. I tend to like my Chardonnays at 10. Um, thinking back to some of the really spectacular vintages like '05 and 2001. Today those wines are still drinking amazingly well. They're obviously darkened in color. Proteins have oxidized in those wines, and so they have more of a dark golden color, but there's still a freshness, a flavor, and still great acidity, and still a real youthfulness to those wines.
Right. One thing I've found in drinking a lot of your Chardonnays is like in this wine, just the same. I get this really beautiful floral and honeyed characteristic on the nose that I
Yeah,
really, really enjoy. And it's like really balanced out by a really great acidity. You kind of this beautiful honey and then this nice acidity on the palate. I think is just a great
yeah,
contrast and characteristic to the wines.
yeah, yeah. They have it's like there's this entrance, this beginning, and this finish. The beginning is always fairly delicate.
Yeah,
They're not big, concentrated, dense wines.
not at all.
You know, they don't fall into the category of some of the producers like Aubert or John Kongsgaard, which make really rich, beautiful, dense wines. These are a little more elegant in style, and part of that is the sacrifice you make if you're producing wines that have good acidity and low pHs, and you're looking for the evolution over time. You can't pick them in that ripe, dense style. It's a sort of a trade-off, but that density shows up in the wine after they get to be 9 or 10 years of age. It's almost like some people would call it a donut wine, which is a beginning and a finish, but the middle is still missing.
Yeah.
And as the wine ages in bottle, that middle gets richer and thicker and thicker and thicker. And pretty soon, the beginning, the middle, and the finish all line up together. And then that's when the wine is really, truly at its apex or its most glorious state. And my experience has been that, I tend to see that more at 10 years of age.
Gotcha. Because this is current release, right? 2012. I mean, this is yeah. So
we have not been accused of releasing our wines too early.
No, you have not.
So,
but part of that is, and tell us about this one. But part of this is probably seen quite a few months in barrel, correct?
Well, this particular wine, I mean, I think for anybody who is genuinely passionate about what they do, they're always sort of pushing the envelope to see if they can learn something more. There's so many great winemakers out there that, just because you've been doing it longer than a lot of other people doesn't mean you've been doing it better. And if you get complacent, which is easy to do, especially if you have success early on, then it's like writing the same 3-note song over and over again. I think artists, musicians are always pushing themselves to be better. So for me, I've known for a long time how to successfully make good Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Rosé and Syrah, but I've always wanted to there's a lot of unknowns. What would happen if we aged Chardonnay in barrel for, instead of 14 months or 22 months, what if we did it for 48 months? What would happen? And I had a conversation with Marcel Guigal when he came to visit a mutual friend, his national importer, a guy named Patrick Will, who had a company called X Cellars. And Patrick invited myself over to dinner, and I was asking Marcel Guigal about his La wines, La Landon, La Turque, La Moline, because I noticed that those wines had been aged in barrel for upwards of 60 months, so 5 years. And those were really beautiful wines and some of the most sought after, Syrahs in the world.
Right.
And that seemed like an awfully long time to be aging wine in barrel. And Marcel explained to me that he had been bottling those wines after 2 years, which was kind of normal, but that the wines were harsh, they were tannic, and they took a long time to resolve. And so one particular vintage, he decided to extend that process out, and he just kept tasting the wine. He noticed that after about 3 or 4 years in barrel, the wine got softer, more elegant, and he decided to bottle it. It was one of the best wines, according to him, that he had made. And so he continued, and to this day, they still age those wines between 4 and 5 years, depending on the vintage. And he was trying to explain to me in a not so scientific way, because it wasn't an experiment. It was just the cause and effect. And he said the longer the wine was in barrel, it got darker and harsher and more tannic and more bitter. And at some point it kind of boomeranged back. The color got lighter. The tannins got softer. The bitterness went away. And that it made a really spectacular wine. And it was like, okay, well, why couldn't that be a theory that could be true for any wine? Why does it have to be just Syrah? So in 2008, I decided that I would take that whole vintage and experiment with it. And I think I aged that wine for 42 months. Mostly, I was shooting for 48 for 48 months, and it was like it was a little bit like playing chicken. I started to get a little
nervous.
concerned. Yeah, wake up in the morning and think to myself, what if today is the day that all that wine goes right in the toilet?
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
It's bitter. Yeah. And I remember when Antonio Galloni came to visit me for the first time, and I was tasting him on all the 2008 vintage, all the different wines we made. And he was sitting in my tasting room with his laptop, and he was, just chatting away. And he was like, "This is really good. I like this." He wasn't giving me details, but he was just nodding his head that he was genuinely approving of the wines. And I thought, okay, I should just shut up and let it go. But then I thought to myself, if I didn't, tell him what I had done, and he found out later that, I might fall out of favor. So I finally I said, "Look, I just got to now that you've written your review and that you've tasted all the wines, here's what I did." And he looked at me, kind of with the odd look, and he's like, "Well, why would you do that?" So I explained the kind of the story that I just told you about Marcel.
Yeah.
He said, "I wonder if anybody's ever done that before with Pinot Noir Chardonnay. I mean, it's a very interesting idea, and I would consider it very iconoclastic on your part to take that kind of a risk, first of all." And I said, "Well, I wonder, I'm just thinking back to like the Second World War, when a lot of those vignerons were away fighting the Germans, if a lot of those vintages from those years in the early 40s didn't get bottled, if they just stayed in barrel for 2 or 3 years."
Right.
I don't know if there are records to authenticate it, but it seems kind of interesting. And I wonder, if we could ever find any reviews written by people who do what you do, and their assessments of those wines.
Yeah.
They said, "That's a really fascinating idea." He says, "If I get some time, I'll kind of look into that." I said, "Well, if you find something, let me know. I'd be curious." And when he came back the following year, we retasted the wines again. He loved them even more, but then also tasted the 2009s. And, it's like, "Was this the same amount of time?" I said, "No, this was even longer."
Mm.
And he says, "This can't be good for cash flow." And I said, "Well, it's not, but, we're in a terrible crisis right now. With the economy crashing in
Right.
2008.
Right.
I had plenty of 2005s and 2006s to sell. I didn't need to rush to bottle the 8s or 9s. And so, so this 2012 was 48 months in barrel, 4 years in barrel, and then in bottle for a good 3 or 4 years before we ever got around to releasing it. So we're at the tail end of the vintage. 2013 is about to be released, but there's still, a couple hundred cases of 2012 left, and we're in no hurry to release the 13s.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us just a little bit about the Clos Pepe vineyard, because it's kind of been a staple of the Arcadian vineyard program for a while, right? And you're doing Pinot and Chard out of there.
Yeah, so the Clos Pepe is one of those vineyards that has, established itself as one of the top Santa Rita Hills. It's adjacent to Kessler Hawk. It's just due west of Melville and Babcock. It's in a really good spot on the northern side of the Santa Rita Hills. It's mostly planted to Pinot Noir. There's not very much Chardonnay there. And we only get an acre. So,
okay.
It's just not, I'm going to say there's probably 3 or 4 acres total of Chardonnay, maybe 5 max.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, small.
Yeah. I mean, the whole vineyard's only 35 acres. And, 30 acres are planted to Pinot Noir, and that makes sense. So, initially we investigated this Chardonnay for the potential possibility of making a sparkling wine from it. Ultimately, we decided that it was just a tad too warm. It's about 5 miles east of Theresa, Noelle, which is ultimately much, much cooler than Clos Pepe, and although Clos Pepe's a cold vineyard.
Right.
You know, what's unique about the Santa Rita Hills is the topography. It's an east-west traverse, and there's only two in the whole west coast, meaning that if you go from Alaska all the way down to the tip of South America, there's only two growing areas that run true east-west. Most of them run northwest, southeast, and rely on a diurnal airflow to keep them cool. So Russian River,
Napa, Sonoma.
Napa, Sonoma, Willamette Valley, even the Okanagan Valley up in Canada. Santa Lucia Highlands would be a warm site if not for the fact that just south of it is Paso Robles.
Mm-hmm.
Where Paso is, it gets quite hot because it's inland enough. There's no marine influence. And so, in Paso, which is about an hour south of Santa Lucia Highlands, it reaches 110 degrees. Well, we know when air gets hot, it rises like a balloon. That creates a vortex on the surface. So that causes the cold green air that's sitting out on Monterey Bay to come whipping down through the Salinas Valley. And that's what keeps the Santa Lucia Highlands, Sleepy Hollow, Gary's, Tundra Grapefield, all of those vineyards cool, is this diurnal airflow. Well, millions of years ago, the two tectonic plates, the Pacific plate under the bottom of the ocean, and the continental plate, which is what the U.S. sits on, were pushing against each other. And the Pacific plate pushed the continental plate such that it created a sort of a dogleg left to Tijuana from just slightly north of Santa Maria. And so the Santa Maria Valley and the Santa Rita Hills, which kind of ran northwest, southeast like all the other growing areas, moved to a true east-west because of the shift of the whole, you can imagine the whole continental plate shifting, that if you look at a coastline of the U.S., you see California kind of splits and hangs that left looking south down to Mexico. And so now we have a true marine influence. I mean, as the tide comes in, so comes in the fog and the cold weather. And what that means for Santa Rita Hills is that we have one of the longest growing seasons in the world.
Yeah.
To give you just a comparison, Willamette Valley is about 14 weeks. Burgundy is about 16 weeks. And Santa Rita Hill, we're at 18 weeks. What that means is that the respiration of acidity, the ripening of the fruit happens at a slower rate in the Santa Rita Hills. That makes my job much, much easier because there's no rush to harvest. You hear stories of winemakers in Napa literally sleeping out in the vineyards near harvest,
right?
Because they're checking ambient evening temperatures. They're checking out sugar evolution, and they may say, we're going to pick in the morning. Where I can drive out to a vineyard mid-morning, sample grapes, and make a projection, and we're going to pick in 10 days, and be pretty much spot on. Picking in 9 days or 11 days.
Right.
And because you see the sort of slow transitioning of ripeness. The daytime highs are, in the mid 60s to low 70s, and the nighttime lows are in the high 50s, mid to high 50s. So you don't see a huge fluctuation in temperature. So it's fairly even in, and it allows the grapes to ripen at a very slow pace, and you tend not to lose acidity. That's the big advantage to coastal growing regions, is we maintain the acidity because it doesn't get hot enough. when you have really hot weather like Napa Valley, you know, you're sweating out the acid.
Right.
It's literally evaporating, within right in front of you. And so, you pick grapes from Napa Valley. Typically, the acids are low and the pHs are high, and certain varietals are perfect for that, like Cabernet and Bordeaux varietals, Sauvignon Blanc. But
Right.
cool grapes like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, really benefit from the kind of growing season we see in the Santa Rita Hills.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, this is a great wine.
Yeah, that's super delicious.
Yeah, it's perfect tonight, but I can see this one going on for many, many years and being very, very enjoyable and increasing in some complexity for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, man. So we are at 50 minutes, and I think hour for Instagram Live is our time limit. So I'm just going to quickly look and see if anybody has any quick questions for Joe, and we'll go from there. So out of curiosity, Joe, what is the other wine growing region that has that west to east, like Santa Rita Hills? What was the other one?
Santa Maria Valley.
Santa Maria Valley. Okay, that's cool.
Which is about 30 miles north. So
okay,
look at where Au Blanc Climat is and Fox and those guys. Yeah, that's another.
That's interesting. The two that run that way geographically are so close together.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, but just south of us, there's not a lot of growing regions for grapes. Temecula is really kind of out in the desert.
Right.
Closer to Palm Springs than it is to the ocean.
Right.
And then the next potential growing region is in Mexico.
Yeah, for sure. Baja, I guess, Baja wine region or whatever.
Yeah. I think Arroyo Grande, which is just north of Santa Maria, probably benefits from some of that Santa Maria, lie. It is warmer than Santa Maria is, but close enough to sort of get some benefits from the ocean there. But then as you get north of that, it changes completely. Once you get above Arroyo Grande, you're getting into Paso and Atascadero, and the grapes change completely. The temperature, you have a lot of Zinfandel there, a lot of Rhone varietals, a lot of producers who are known for making really big ripe style wines.
Yeah. So going back to kind of keeping your wines in barrel for extended period of time, am I crazy, or did you tell me you had some Syrah that had been in barrel like 8 to 10 years?
Yeah. So I had some Sleepy Hollow Syrah.
That's right. Yeah.
That I've been playing around with. 2 barrels that are still in barrel, and it's 2020 and it's 2008 vintage. So that's it. It's been in barrel for 12 years now. At some point, it might turn into balsamic vinegar.
Yeah, I've been drinking quite a bit of the normal bottled 2008 Sleepy Hollow myself here lately, as we had quite a bit of it. So it's actually showing really, really well right now.
Yeah, it is, and that was 48 months in barrel.
Yeah.
These 2 barrels, I sort of sacrificed, these 50 cases worth of wine, to see if I could find an end point.
Right. Push the limits.
Yeah. When will we taste the wine? It's like, okay, we went too far.
Yeah, right. That's cool. You should bottle 1 barrel and keep pushing the next.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I've had people. It's interesting. It's nothing like the regular 2008. It's kind of like black forest cake. It smells like rich black chocolate and cherries.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the alcohol's not very high,
Yeah.
but it's very dense, very dense wine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool.
Um,
That's cool.
yeah,
Well, you should put some in bottle. That'd be fun for some folks to try and keep pushing
yeah,
the other barrel. See what the limits
yeah.
are. That'd be
With
cool.
this,
All right, man. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up as we're almost at an hour. Time flies when you're talking about great wine. Joe, thank you so much. Appreciate taking time out to do this.
Brian, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Absolutely,
Enjoyed it.
guys. Yeah, thank you all for watching, and we'll see you again next time when we do another one soon. Joe, see you, buddy.
Okay,
Yep.
bye.
Bye bye.